What's up, guys? Jesse DeRozier here with Hydrilla Gorilla Guide Service on Lake Guntersville. This is week number 9 of my new series entitled What's on the Deck. And this week we had a very productive week. The warming trend that we had that came in this week definitely seemed to help increase fish activity. And as of yesterday, we ended up with a true Hydrilla gorilla in the boat right at the end of the day. So we'll discuss that here in just a minute as to what bait actually put that fish in the boat. So this week, we'll start as we did last week. We'll go through the, I guess, mid-range depths that we've been fishing. I am more of a shallow water guy, so I like basically in the wintertime being in 15 foot or less if I can. If I have to go out deep, I will. But what I'm doing in that 9 to 15 foot zone is the same as what you can do out in 25 to 30 foot. So that much doesn't matter. The baits will be the same. The presentations will be the same. The only difference is it's just locating exactly what water depth your schools are located at and adjusting your lures to hit in between the fish and the bass, or the bait fish and the bass. So first off are my bottom baits. The heavy metal lures in the wintertime are definitely old school techniques, but they work. And they've stuck around over the years because they work. This is the old school blade bait. And that specific bait, basically, we're taking it and throwing it out. If you see fish on the bottom, you're picking them up on your side imaging or seeing them on live, and they're down basically glued to the bottom. For those fish, you're going to throw it out beyond the fish, let the bait get all the way to the bottom, and do pay attention to your line. Make sure that that line doesn't just have a subtle bow in it. You want that line to, as it's falling, it's going to have that subtle bow. When it hits bottom, it's going to go limp and it will fall to the lake. When it falls to the lake, now you know that your bait is on bottom. I have noticed a lot of my clients think that they have given enough time for it to reach bottom, and I'm turned my live scope over there and I see their bait is still 3, 4, 5 feet up off the bottom, and they're working it like they're working it on bottom, but they're not actually down on the bottom where they need to be. So make sure that you're giving that line time to relax and fall to the lake. Then you know that you're where you need to be. Once you're there, you're going to reel up your slack and lift. And with the blade bait, you're only wanting to lift it about 9 inches to a foot. I mean, maybe 1.5 feet at the most. Basically, you want to feel that bait. It's going to vibrate when it lifts, and then you're going to feel it hit 3, 4 times. And just stop lifting, reel up your slack as it falls. And the fish is going to hit it as it drops. And what you're wanting to do is give it just a mild bit of resistance, so just that mild slack in your line as it's falling. You don't want to be tight lined to it. You want that bait to lift and then fall. Each time it does that, when it's falling, that fish is going to run up, and that'll be its opportunity to take a swat at it. If you've got live, a lot of times you'll see them, they'll run up and they'll chase it, and it might be 3, 4, 5 lifts before it finally commits to that bait. Each time it goes up, it gets excited. When it falls, that's its opportunity because it's ran up on the bait, and now it has a choice. It's either got to try to stop its momentum, eat it, or turn off. And what you're looking for is for them to just finally eat the bait. The same technique is being done with the old school tail spinner. The new one that's out is a Duracoop, and honestly, it probably has less fouls than the old school Little George. The old school Little George is bad about the hook actually getting up and over the wire like that, and it messes up. So that's the only aggravating part about throwing the Little George, but for the amount of fish that it catches, I'll deal with it. That bait, you're going to work the same exact way. Throw it out, lift, reel, lift, reel. The only difference is that one I typically lift a little bit longer. You don't tend to feel that tail vibration until you've kind of made a little bit higher lift with it. So I'll usually lift it about maybe 1 foot to 1.5 feet. And then the same thing, reel as you let it fall so that you're taking up the slack so that you're ready for the next pull. Don't just let it sit on the bottom dead still. At the time it hits bottom, you want to be making your next pull up. You don't want it just still on the bottom, just sitting in the silt. So it is something that you're constantly, you know, pull, reel, pull, reel. And as it falls, that's when you're going to get those bites. The third bait, which I forgot to pull out, is actually the old school jigging spoon. That's another metal wintertime bait. Same deal. You got the bait ball up high and the fish below. The difference being with the jigging spoon is you're not looking for the fish that are necessarily glued to the bottom. You're looking for the ones that are up just a little bit. So that's your next water column, basically. So the first two are down on the bottom. Jigging spoon is the next one's up. You're going to hop it a little bit higher. You're looking to basically pull that jigging spoon up to the bottom of the bait ball and let it flutter back down through the fish. Hop it up through the bait ball, or up to the bottom of the bait ball and flutter back down. You want it to look like a dying shad falling out of that school. The other bottom bait, it's not a true, I guess, metal bait like the others because it does have a soft plastic added to it, but is a 2.8 Kitech on, that is a 3/8 ounce Dirty Jigs guppy head. And with this one, you want to stay glued to the bottom. If you look at the nose of that bait, it has worn the paint off of it. So you're wanting to get this down on the bottom and crawl it. And when I say crawl, I mean this is about how fast I'm working this thing across the bottom. I am literally crawling it. And if you can't slow yourself down or you have a high-speed reel, you can worm it. Basically, just slow drag it. You can physically watch your rod tip and see how much ground you're covering. You want to be covering very, very little ground. The slower, the better. You'd be surprised how many fish will eat that thing when it's just barely crawling across the bottom. The next water column is literally, again, hitting from the bass to the bottom of the bait ball. That zone is where you need to be keeping the majority of your baits on everything going forward. The jerk bait, the deep jerk bait, this is a Mega Bass Vision 110+1. You could throw a Berkeley Stunna 112+1, or the Mega Bass +2 if you're out in deeper water and you need to get it down deeper. Basically, you're going to throw this beyond the school. What I'll usually do is reel it to get it to dive, because if you start jerking it right away, it's going to stay higher in the water column and take way longer for it to get down. So I'm going to reel the first 10 feet of my throw to get that bait to dive. Once I get it down, I'm going to start working it, and I want to be getting just below the bait ball. I want my bait to be the first thing that those bass get to before they get to the bait ball. You don't want to be below the bass. If you're below the bass, they're not going to come down to hit it. They're looking to feed up. And that's the reason why the bottom baits are for the bass that are glued to the bottom. These baits are for the ones that are a little up in the water column, looking up to feed on the bait balls. The next one is an underspin. This is a 3/8 ounce Dirty Jigs guppy head underspin, and that is a Reaction Innovations Little Dipper. And we're taking that and doing the same thing. We're running right between the bait ball and the bass. And we've had a couple of options as far as our underspins. I was throwing the Picasso with the flexible collar with the blade on it. Unfortunately, I've lost all of those that I had, and so now I'm utilizing others that I have in stock until I can get some more of those ordered. But this one is the Berkeley 3/8 ounce underspin. Again, Reaction Innovations. This one is the Disco Shad, is the color that we're throwing on that one. So those were two that we used yesterday. And if you haven't figured out how to throw a jig head minnow, the next best thing that you can do to kind of get that same presentation, because you're looking for that bait to rock and roll over. With the underspins, the blade is your action, your flash, and you get a little bit of rock and kick off the tail. With these, this is a scrounger style lure, and same with the jig head minnow. You're looking for that bait to rock side to side. That's the only action that you're getting Other than the jig head minnow, you are kind of bouncing the bait as well. So it's kind of got two actions. This is going to primarily have the one, you're going to throw it out, get it down to the right depth, and steady reel it. And it's going to have that rolling side-to-side action. This one is a 1/2 ounce, but the reason why is because it's a little bit heavier hook. I've had to go with a little heavier line, as well as this is the Elastec, so it floats, and it's going to give some resistance to the fall. So if I were to run a 3/8 ounce on that one, it's not going to get to the water column that I'm needing. So I did go to a 1/2 on that one. I personally have not thrown it this week, but Alabama rig. I've talked to a lot of guys who are still utilizing this and catching fish like crazy. I've not been out that deep this week to have put this to work, but Alabama rig definitely is a great option. The last open water bait that we've been using has been the jig head minnow, as I mentioned. And I've been throwing two primarily. This is the Crush City. And you can see the teeth marks on that from yesterday. That's the Crush City jig head minnow with, this is the Ducket sway head. I really like that. It's got a little bit of tungsten from my understanding in it, and it gets really good feedback on the live sonar so that you can see that, and it's got an excellent rolling action. Make sure that if you're throwing these jig head minnows though, that you are tying a loop knot. It does make a difference, guys. If you're tying just a Palomar knot or any type of cinch knot and it's going straight to the eyelet, you're losing the ability of that bait to roll as freely by doing that. It's having to fight your line to get it to roll over. If you tie a loop knot, that loop knot does the work for you. It allows for that bait to swing. This one actually is the first time I threw it, or we threw it, was yesterday. And we had very good results with it. This is the Dirty Jigs 3/16, and this is a 4-inch true bass, 4-inch, I think it's called Blue Shad, I think is the color of that one. But at the end of the day, my client actually put a 767 in the boat with that little 4-inch bait. So they absolutely get 8. And just because these are small wintertime baits does not mean they won't catch giant bass. But that's the majority of my bait ball type presentations of what I've been working. If I'm chasing bait, if I'm out on the main river and I'm fishing more open water out there, basically what I'm looking for is good grass out on the river ledges. And there I'm going to be utilizing two main techniques, or two main, I guess, one technique, two lures, which has been the DT6 by Rapala and the DT10. So all of that's just based on how deep the ledge is and the grass. If it's thicker, clumpier grass, Hydrilla, milfoil, coontail, those, they usually grow higher up off the bottom than the eelgrass, and I'm having to throw the DT6. If I'm working the same area but it turns to eelgrass, the eelgrass is only like foot and a half tall, and I need to get it down deeper, I'm running the DT10. So keep both on the deck and make sure that you're throwing the right one in the right areas. If you lose contact with the grass and you're throwing a DT6, pick up the deeper one. If you're digging in the grass and you're coming back with Hydrilla or milfoil or something on your DT10, put that one down, pick up the DT6. So make your adjustments on the fly. Again, utilizing bold shock colors in the wintertime. So your reds, your chartreuses, your purples, those colors seem to work extremely well in cold water. The shallow water presentations. This is my preference. This is the way that I like to fish all year round if I can, is to be in shallow water. That said, for the grass flats, pockets, creek, shallow creek channels, things like that, I'm looking for those clumps of grass on the edges of these breaks, little ditches running through these flats and things like that. I'm going to be utilizing a chatterbait, and again, reds, purples, chartreuses, those colors come into play. This is a homemade chatterbait that I've been tinkering around with. I tied it up to look like the royal red color lipless that Excalibur came out with years and years ago, and now other companies have that same color. But that is a 1/2 ounce. The other one that I'm throwing is also a 3/4 ounce. Taking a 3/4 ounce head to be able to get down into a little deeper water, or again, where you have eelgrass and you don't have the clumps, you have to get down a little bit deeper to be making contact with that grass. So make sure that you're adjusting your weights or your depths of your lures to be making contact with that grass in the wintertime. It's no different than it is in the spring. If I'm up real shallow, which we were yesterday, we were catching fish out of 2 foot of water yesterday, is still going with the producer swim baits, the 3.5 blue minnow Swiminator. And if you look, this thing absolutely gets mauled, guys. We've been catching them on that all fall long, and pairing that with your Thump Gel is a deadly combination. Any of these soft plastic baits, I highly recommend putting this on it, but I've even been adding it to my hard baits, just due to the fact that they have that scent when it hits their mouth. It gives them some other sensation other than just some foreign object that they're not used to feeling being in their mouth. They're actually getting the scent off of that. That gives them that momentary pause and say, you know, is this or isn't this something that I need to try to eat? That added time gives you that time to be able to get that hook set. So make sure you guys are using scent this time of year, all year for that matter. The last lure, and probably my all-time favorite, is going to be a lipless. And this is one that I had tied on yesterday, and I'm gonna go on a little bit of a rant here. So I was throwing an Excalibur, right? Old tried and true. And I had that tied up on a rod with braid. I needed one more rod, and I pulled out one of my rods that had braid on it that I normally use for a swimming frog. It's got 30-pound braid on it, and I thought, okay, well, it'll work. You know, it'll be easy to rip out of the grass. I can feel everything. And I have seen a big difference in the number of bites on a swim jig braid versus fluoro. I was kind of curious to see whether or not this was going to be the same. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure I'm throwing a bait that I know catches fish, right? No doubt about it. I know for a fact that's a proven bait. I tie it on, and I want to do a comparison. I'm on the front of the boat fishing with my clients. My clients are throwing the old school Bill Lewis red rattle trap. They crushed them. They absolutely smoked them. They were catching 3-pounder after 3-pounder. And the guy standing next to me caught 3 and 3 casts, and I'm throwing to the same spot, and I'm not getting touched. I'm throwing a bait I know that they eat. Difference being, I'm throwing braid, they're throwing fluoro. I'm telling you guys, I've seen it with the swim jig. I wanted to try it with a trap and see whether or not this was the case with, you know, because you got baits that make noise. Figured maybe it wouldn't be that big of a difference. It definitely is on the swim jig. Guys, let me tell you, it definitely made a difference. How do I know? Because I didn't just stick with one tried and true bait. I dug around in my box, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to tie on a Bill Lewis. I know they're eating that one. I'm going to let these guys wear them out, and I'm going to keep on with my experiment. And I tied on a Jackal TN70. Another bait, absolutely proven bass catcher. On this braid, you can still see it's still on the braid right now. I caught 2 little dinks. Like 1.5 pounds. They're still catching 3-pounders. I personally feel like it's because of the braid. Now, there's a lot to be said, you know, cadence, everything else, true. I'll give you that one. So my goal is the next couple of days, if I'm out just scouting around, whatever, or even if I have clients, I'm going to leave that braid rod in the boat, and I'm going to continue to try it and see whether or not, if I'm throwing braid, I'm not getting bit, I'm going to work through the same area, and I'm going to pick up the one with the fluoro, and I will go back with the same bait on both rods and try it and see if I get a difference. If I do, I'll let you guys know how that turns out, because I'm kind of curious. Like I said, I know for a fact on the swim jig, it makes a difference. The sound of that braid, I think, coming across the grass with the swim jig, because that swim jig is a silent presentation, definitely alerts the fish that something's up before it gets to the fish. Now, we don't do the whole Alabama shake, where when we're throwing a swim jig, we're getting it down like you do a chatterbait and ticking the tops of the grass. Now, if you're doing Alabama shake, does braid make a difference? Probably not. I'll give you that. But what we're doing is we're constantly making contact with that grass, and that braid dragging through the grass definitely is creating some sort of noise before the bait gets there and alerting these fish. And I'm telling you, we'll get 4 bites on fluoro to 1 on braid. It's that big of a difference. So I'm kind of curious to see whether or not this is definitely the same scenario with braid, because I love the way the braid feels. I like that you can feel the bait. I like you can rip it out of the grass. You can feel the grass, everything. You got a lot more sensation as to what's going on. But 1, I definitely feel like you're going to stretch out your hooks a little easier. 2, you're going to rip holes in the fish a little bit easier. And 3, if it's alerting those fish before the bait gets there, I don't want that. So that's just my little rant as far as the braid. Whether or not that's the case, I'm going to find out. So we'll see what you guys think. You know, I know everybody's got their opinions. You know what they say about opinions. But that's my personal opinion. But I am going to do a test on that and kind of see how that goes for me. Could it have just been their cadence was right? Absolutely. But I will tell you this much. They were not working their baits the same. Me and the guy in the front were working very similar. The guy in the back was not. And he's going behind us and still catching fish. My bait was the first one to the fish and not getting bit. So I definitely feel like that definitely is a factor. These guys absolutely wrecked them. So that right there was a 767 at the end of the day yesterday. And we ended up with 23.5 pound bag, 25 fish, and we did lose 5 more on the way back to the boat. So we should have had a 30 fish day, but it was a good day, really good day. And we did both aspects. We did some open water, deeper water techniques, as well as shallow. So both are working right now, guys. If you're interested in booking a trip, by all means, reach out to me on Facebook through Messenger, or you can reach out to me on my cell phone. My number will be listed in the comments below. But until next week, guys, have a good... I forgot one thing. The weather this coming week. So the next couple of days, we still have rain and a warming trend. As of Tuesday, the temperatures are going to start to dip. By Wednesday, we have a cold front setting in. So as the tail end of the week gets here, we're definitely going to see the bites start to curtail off a little bit. Those adjustments to be made in the wintertime, go with probably more of your open water stuff, unless you have wind. If you have wind, I still go shallow. But if I've got bluebird skies, which is typical of your cold fronts, less wind and bluebird skies, I'm going to go out deeper. So make those adjustments based on what the weather patterns are doing. If you've got wind, you can definitely go up shallow. And fish, focus on those creek channels, ditches, drains, hard spots, grass clumps. Those are the things that are going to be holding these fish during this time of year. But until next week, guys, have a good evening and tight lines.